against a police state, against racist intersectionality, against political correctness, against mob rule, against the racist socialist left, against the victimhood liars. The idiots have been in charge way too long. And that's why you're here. For the podcast you need. All for liberty all the time. Welcome to Liberty Bites Back. With your host, Brandon Imo.
Welcome to the second episode of Liberty Bites Back. Today, I'm going to go over if you really are a citizen, if you have no rights. The best thing to correlate with this topic is Puerto Ricans. Now, while many Puerto Ricans are Puerto Rican citizens and United States citizens, it is important to note the Balzac versus Puerto Rico 258 U.S. 298 in the year of 1922. It was a case in which the Supreme Court of the United States held that certain provisions of the U.S. Constitution did not apply to the territories not incorporated into the Union. The court did say that Puerto Ricans should have a fundamental rights, but the court left it unsolved, the exact personal rights that were so fundamental that they should extend to American citizens in Puerto Rico. So basically the rights are incoherent and end up to the officials in Puerto Rico. The only way Puerto Ricans can get full U.S. citizen rights are if they move to the mainland in the United States, the 50 states in the United States. That would be the only way they can receive their full rights under the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution. So in reality, is a Puerto Rican in Puerto Rico truly a citizen? While they are in Puerto Rico, I would argue they are not. But they do have a chance to move to the mainland to obtain full constitutional rights, which does make them more or less a citizen, but like they are living in a foreign land with no rights in Puerto Rico, except those from the Puerto Rican Constitution. And this is why I've always advocated for Puerto Rico to become the 51st state, as many territories are in a gray area of law. Now, their constitution does have many great bills of rights themselves, but it doesn't give them the ability of a jury, unless it's a felony. While some of their bills of rights go steps further than ours, and personally I feel that they need to be adopted, like wiretapping and spying is condemned and stated, and it gives a true right of privacy. These laws would still exist like a state constitution, though, if they did become a state. Their Bill of Rights that I certainly like are Section 1, and the Section 1 reads, "The dignity of human being is inviolable. All men are equal before the law. No discrimination shall be made on the account of race, color, sex, birth, social origin, or condition, or political or religious ideas. Both the laws and the system of public education shall embody those principles of essential human equality." Now, this Bill of Rights section really just expands on what we already have established in civil rights law. But they have an amendment in their Constitution that says all of this. It also expands civil rights law by including political or religious ideas, assuring that all ideas can flourish in Puerto Rico. Another section I certainly like is Section 3, which says, "No law shall be made respecting an establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. There shall be a complete separation of church and state." I personally like that amendment as well. That one's one of the better ones I've seen in some of these like local constitutions. And then Section 4 is also a good one in their constitution. It states, no law shall be made abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So, if you can see here, the First Amendment is changed to instead have two different amendments. One bringing equality to all people, and also protecting the religious ideas and political ideas, which is good. But then the Section 4 makes it so the press and the freedom of speech is even more guaranteed for other people that won't fall under. Now, most of these are also in our laws of the United States. But now if we look at Section 10, it gets super spicy. Now, Section 10 reads as, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. It also states that wiretapping is prohibited. No warrant for arrest or search and seizure shall issue except by judicial authority and only upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, in the persons to be arrested, or the things to be seized. Evidence obtained in violation of this section shall be inadmissible in the courts. So in Section 10, it distinctly makes wiretapping illegal. But if the United States Constitution rights is not available to use there in Puerto Rico, can you really consider them fully a citizen when calculating the rights they are not allowed? One day I hope to see this land of opportunity join the Union, or do their independently chosen future. And then, this all brings me to my second question. Are we citizens or subjects during this COVID-19 edict tyranny? In many states throughout our republic, the United States, we have been seeing a clear, defiant regard to our Bill of Rights. The right to practice our religion freely is being suppressed. Our First Amendment is being thrown into question as even doctors themselves are being censored for their thoughts, as the media and government agree they have the wrong thoughts. So why are we being placed in this tyranny of allowing thought crime to exist in the Republic? Why are our own fundamental rights being eroded during this time? More importantly, why are businesses and people themselves ignoring civil rights law and everyone is okay with it? All for a virus of around 0.6% death rate? And that's with the inflated numbers. It's really crazy. Now, I would like to go over how our rights of worshiping has been eroded. I'm going to go ahead and go over that. And Vox, of all people, has covered that. I'm sure they're a bit biased on it. Go ahead and see. The Supreme Court's surprising decision on churches and the pandemic. The Nevada churches brought an unusual strong challenge to the state's public health rules, but they lost anyway, to even our Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has ruled for a second time in the last 2 months against a church which sought exemptions from the statewide restrictions on the houses of worship during the COVID-19 pandemic. And that would have been Calvary Chapel, Dayton Valley versus Sisolak. A decision handed down on Friday night is a very different case than the South Bay United Pentecostal Church versus Nosom. The decision from May in which the court also ruled against a church that objected to state public health rules. Both decisions were 5-4, with conservative Chief Justice John Roberts crossing over the vote with his 4 liberal colleagues. But the church in Calvary Chapel presented a much stronger legal argument than the church in the earlier case, and they still lost. The Supreme Court has ruled that our right to practice our religion freely, to them, is legal. It's legal to suppress it. So currently we don't have a right to practice our religion freely in the Republic. It's really, really crazy. Good thing to remember with these is these edicts are not law from governors or mayors, but they place themselves like kings doing decrees, fear-mongering the public and pushing propaganda to make the public hostile to anyone questioning the tyrannical decrees or anyone exempt from the decrees, whether they are rape victims, religious folk, medically exempt, or in a sector where they are exempt. The anger and the aggression with the message of masks up, save lives, tends to make the public following the decrees automatically go to calling even rape victims murderers, to even also having politicians pushing for the exempt or patriotic to be considered attempted murderers. I'm going to go over that story with you real quick. But people need to understand there's a lot of different reasons why people could have exemptions. Rape victims themselves could have exemptions. And the medical. And through civil rights law, the religious can have an exemption to the masks. Let's go over this crazy Nashville City Councilwoman. Now this was back in August 9th, 2020. A Nashville, Tennessee councilwoman wants those who don't wear a mask during the coronavirus pandemic to be charged with attempted murder. Her name is Sharon Hart, and she's an at-large councilwoman at the Nashville Metro Council. She joined on August 5th meeting between public safety beer and regulated beverages and health, hospitals, and social services committees. And she said during the meeting, "My question goes back to legislation, but my concern is, you know, I work with an organization that if they pass a virus, then they are tried for murder or attempted murder. If they're not told, and this person who may very well pass this virus, that's out in the air because they're not wearing a mask. It's basically doing the same thing to someone who contracts it and dies from it." And let me just say, all of that is foolish. These masks have just as many scientific studies showing they don't work as many as they have showing they do work. Currently, in my thought line, I think we are no longer citizens when our thoughts alone are a crime. And we are subjects by these self-employed kings and queens who were only elected to be mayors, governors, I guess councilwomen. Sad times we live in today. And then I do want to go over how important it is that we do go back to normalcy. Now, during the Spanish flu, they were yearning for a new normal as well. And do you know what the American people did to get back normalcy? All of the American people did not agree with San Francisco on mandating those masks. We voted for Warren G. Harding because he promised he would allow the people to enter back into normalcy. And back to normalcy we went. We didn't worship the mask mandates of San Francisco, but instead we, the people, were upset and scared of the implications of such law in the 1900s. Where is the outrage today? Where is the courage? The courage of the people. Where is the people shouting for normalcy? Well, many are, but it's not sadly overwhelming. I certainly hope for it to turn so soon. I hope many come out and want the normalcy, because that is what we need. These muzzles and the mask holes who bother the maskless are just infuriating. Exemptions exist, and still you see people getting in people's faces, ignoring their precious edicts of 6 feet distance, mind you. Pulling their masks off to yell at a rape victim, for all they know, to get their mask on. Religious exemptions exist, rape victims are often exempted, and so many medical exemptions exist. In Ohio, the journalists themselves are exempted, along with police officers. There's so many exemptions in many of these areas. And a lot of lawyers in Ohio are stating if you're wearing a mask, you want to, because we have a lot of exemptions, and practically everyone can fall into an exemption here. Now, civil rights law is not forgotten just because an edict has been put into place. That means if it's religious reasons, a business cannot segregate you because you're maskless. Or it is a lawsuit waiting to happen. I see in the next months lawsuits galore going against many corporations and small businesses due to their employees' actions of not respecting laws and instead only focusing on the edicts. Now let's return to normalcy now. Let's return fully back to normalcy, to be honest. Let's get rid of these intolerable edicts of the governors and mayors and councilwomen and councilmen. But let's also get rid of the intolerable acts of Congress. There's way more laws that have been happening in the last 2 decades. The Patriot Act, that spying crap, it has to go. The NDAA, allowance of indefinite detention, get rid of it. All of these are worse than the Boston Port Act, the Massachusetts Government Act, the Administration of Justice Act, nor the Quartering Act. These are the 21st century's intolerable acts, and the edicts are clearly intolerable edicts. Who can tolerate any of these? I surely can't. Give me liberty or give me death. The uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct Terrorism Act of 2001, which is the USA PATRIOT Act, that ruined the Fourth Amendment and made it void. The Fourth Amendment reads as follows: the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. You know, I woke up when I was 5 years old, and that right was stolen from me. I've often said that my generation had the weird realization when we read 1984. We were seeing it implemented in front of us by our own government. All of our personal information is being stored. We are being watched by all mediums of video cameras connected to the internet. What rights do we have with these laws in place? None! And that's the issue of today's day and age. I've often thought the only way to end 1984 is 1776. And that just may be true. They did try to change it. The USA Freedom Act, uniting and strengthening America by fulfilling rights and ending eavesdropping, dragnet collection, and online monitoring act, was thought to be an answer to these issues, but it doesn't hit all the issues created by the Patriot Act. In 2012, the NDAA in subsections 1021 to 1022 of Title X, Subtitle D, entitled Counterterrorism, authorizes the indefinite military detention of persons the government suspects of involvement in terrorism, including U.S. citizens arrested on American soil. And that took away the Fifth Amendment in habeas corpus. And the Fifth Amendment reads as, "No person shall be held to answer for a capital or other infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land of naval forces or in the militia, which in the actual service of time of war or public danger shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for the public use without just compensation." And habeas corpus is a recourse in law challenging the reasons or conditions of a person's confinement under color of law. A petition for habeas corpus is filed with a court that has jurisdiction over the custodian, and if granted, a writ is issued directing the custodian to bring the confined person before the court for examination into those reasons or conditions. Now, basically, it's if you get arrested while being in your rights, you have the right to not be imprisoned, which indefinite detention prevents, and also prevents you any regular courts of law, to the NDAA of 2012. Another intolerable act is FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It is another intolerable act, and one that our current president, Donald Trump, has seen the horrors of. They approved around 99.97% of all FISA warrants asked for, and yet again our Fourth Amendment is violated. So what do? Well, normalcy is the cure. We must go back to the Republic of the United States with a functioning Constitution, with all our bills of rights intact. If they want to get rid of any, which I'd recommend an amendment on the amendment of the 16th Amendment to bring us back to even more normalcy, and while you're at it, you can also amend the 13th Amendment to get rid of the legalized slavery portion. Now, I don't know if many of you have heard this, but Nancy Pelosi's home was descended upon by protesters. And they dubbed her tree the Freedom Tree, and hung hair curlers and blow dryers on it. Furious over her hypocrisy during these COVID-19 tyrannical times. The rules for thee, but not for thee, elitists, are now showing themselves. Truly, video is released showing Nancy Pelosi maskless like those she calls morons. And she was also in a business that the government won't allow to open indoors. All of that does show the hypocrisy of Nancy Pelosi. And it's sad, instead of leaving it there, many are instead pushing masks with the story. At that point, I lose interest in any mask pusher who always lacks a PhD. Well, they always say I'm no doctor. Well, then let Ron Paul speak in your place so he can tell you the real issues. Stating that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about a great article written by Stephen C. Miller. Go ahead and pull that up for you. Read it to you. The title is Lockdowns and Mask Mandates Do Not Lead to Reduced COVID Transmission Rates or Deaths. New study suggests. A new National Bureau of Economic Research working paper by Andrew Atkinson, Karen Kapecki, and Tao Jia focused on countries and U.S. states with more than 1,000 COVID deaths as of late of July. In all, the study included 25 U.S. states and 23 countries. Based on their analysis, the authors presented 4 stylized facts about COVID-19, which are: once a region reaches 25 total COVID deaths within a month, the growth rate in deaths per day falls to approximately 0. In other words, no matter the country or state and its policies, deaths per day stop increasing within 20 to 30 days of passing a threshold of 25 deaths. Number 2, once that happens, deaths per day either begin to fall or the trend remains flat. And then number 3, the variability in death trends across regions have fallen sharply since the beginning of the epidemic and remains low. All states studied, all countries studied have become more similar in their trends and have remained so. And then number 4, observations 1 to 3 suggest that the effective reproduction number, R, has hovered around 1 worldwide after the first 30 days of the epidemic. The paper's conclusion is that the data trends observed above likely indicate that the non-pharmaceutical interventions, such as lockdowns, closures, and travel restrictions, stay-home orders, event bans, quarantines, curfews, and mask mandates, do not seem to affect virus transmission rates overall. Why? Because those policies have varied in their timing and implementation across countries and states, but the trends and outcomes, they don't vary. From the study's offers, location and sampling uncertain, the black solid line in both charts represent the median posture estimate. The solid magenta line in the top chart represents median growth rate of the 7-day smoothed daily deaths for all 50 locations and corresponds only to the left scale. The 2 dashed bands in the both charts contain 2/3 of the prosperity probability at each point in time, and 2 dashed bands of 0.9 of the prosperity probability. The growth rates of the death is estimated according to the fitted Weibull function. Effective reproduction numbers and normalized transmission rates are based on the SIR model, and day 0 is the earliest date in which the cumulative death toll reached 25 in each location. Now, this study does run a counter to the previous studies claiming that NPIs are effective in reducing transmission rates during the early stages of the pandemics. But one of the key candidates for the key's omitted variable, the true cause of the decline in the transmission rates after the first month in the epidemic, is that the human interaction does not conform to simple epidemiological models. In the real world, human social networks overlap in such a way that a virus can spread rapidly for a short period of time, as some people contact more networks than others, but reaches natural dead ends and roundabouts where potential new hosts and new social networks have already been exposed through other networks. The effect can resemble what some think of as a herd immunity, but relatively low infection rates. The authors reason that if NPIs are effective early on, they do not appear to be anymore. You heard that. These NPIs that they are talking about, that would be the non-pharmaceutical interventions, which are lockdowns, closures, travel restrictions, stay-home orders, event bans, quarantines, curfews, and mask mandates. This study showed that if they were effective early on, they certainly are not now. So why don't we open up? Why don't we stop this mask bullcrap and just move on from our lives, go back into normalcy? And then our other story is about iHeartMedia, which now is iHeart Epstein Island Goers, as Bill Clinton is going to be hosting a podcast with them. Now, who wants to listen to Bill Clinton on a podcast? Well, anyone who hates this podcast, I recommend his. Go ahead, listen to the creep instead, if you hate how I expose the mainstream darlings and such. But in 2021, Bill Clinton will be launching the Idiotic podcast. Craig Menison, the Chief Communications and Marketing Officer for the Clinton Foundation, confirmed the deal to Deadline, which first reported the agreement. The show will be built on his gift for storytelling. Oh yeah, I'm sure he lies out his butt. His ability to explain complex issues in a relatable way and showcase his wide range of interests. Yeah, which interests are you going to be talking about, Bill Clinton? And the well-known intellectual curiosity through conversations. Is that why you're on the island? For conversations? Not what the witness says. It says you were with a young girl. About 2 of them, to be exact. And about the ideas and events that continue to shape his world. His work in our world. I don't know what ideas and events I want of his of shaping my world, but if you're into that, I guess you can check his podcast out. Now, the Clinton Foundation's previous podcast, which was Why Am I Telling You This?, which launched last year featuring Chelsea Clinton as a co-host and several high-profile guests. Well, while he's launching his podcast, America's Witch, Hillary Clinton, is planning to launch hers this year as well. I hope she goes over how the chicken in the backyard is set up for Moloch and such, just like her weird revealing emails indicated. And I would never understand how any organization thinks that this is a good idea to place Bill Clinton with his Epstein past onto their network, nor Hillary on their airlines, and think anything good will happen from it. It's lunacy at its best, folks. Now, I would like to go ahead and thank you all for listening to the second episode of Liberty Bites Back. Make sure to comment, like, and share. I hope you have a great day.